buy a house in Japan, and the building you paid for is treated as worthless in about 22 years. Not damaged, not falling down, worthless on paper. A wooden home loses its entire official value in roughly 2 decades, while the same house in many other countries would still be quietly gaining value. To a foreign buyer, this sounds insane. Why would anyone build, buy, or carefully maintain something designed to reach zero? But that 22-year figure is not a description of a house crumbling. It is a rule, a very specific accounting rule, and once you see where it comes from, Japan's whole strange housing market suddenly starts to make sense. So consider 3 things: where the 22 years actually comes from, why it makes Japanese homes behave like cars, and why the popular idea that houses here die in a couple of decades is only half true. In most of the West, a house is an appreciating asset. You buy it, the structure and the land tend to rise in value together, and years later you sell for more than you paid. In Japan, the mental model is completely different. Here, a house behaves like a car. The moment it is built and lived in, it begins losing value, year after year, until the building itself is worth almost nothing, and what you are really left holding is the land underneath it. That one shift explains a whole cascade of behavior that baffles outsiders. It is why buyers overwhelmingly chase brand new construction. It is why a 10-year-old home can sell for a fraction of what it cost to build. And it is why so many older houses are simply demolished and replaced instead of renovated and resold. To many Japanese buyers, a previously owned house carries the same quiet stigma a used car does. Someone else's wear, someone else's taste, and an unknown clock already ticking. New means clean, safe, and built to the latest earthquake codes. The building is the part that depreciates. The land is the asset that lasts. Separate those 2 ideas in your head, and you are already seeing Japanese property the way the market itself does. So where does the 22 years come from? It is set by Japan's National Tax Agency as the statutory useful life, the legal lifespan used for tax purposes. For a wooden home, that life is 22 years. For light-gauge steel, 19. For heavier steel, 34. And for reinforced concrete, 47 years. These numbers decide how an owner writes the building's cost off against income over time. And here is the point almost everyone misses. These are accounting figures, not physical ones. A wooden house does not collapse at 22. The tax code simply stops recognizing its value at that point. For a building already past its legal life, the remaining write-off is calculated as the statutory life times 0.2, which for old wood can be as little as 4 years. So on paper, an older Japanese house is not slowly drifting down in value. It has, in the eyes of the system, already arrived at zero. The structure can be sound, the roof solid, the foundations good, and the official value is still, essentially, nothing. Put real numbers on it. Imagine a wooden house built for 30 million yen, about $200,000, sitting on a plot of land worth 20 million yen, roughly $130,000. The day it is finished, the combined value is 50 million yen. Now fast forward 22 years. The building's official value has marched all the way down to essentially zero, while the land, which never depreciates, is still worth its 20 million. The owner began with a 50 million yen asset and, on paper, now holds a 20 million yen one, and nearly all of that loss is the structure, not the ground beneath it. Nothing dramatic happened to the house. No disaster, no neglect. It simply followed the schedule the tax code wrote for it the day it was built. This is why a Japanese homeowner often cannot cash out of a house the way an American or British owner expects. The part of the property that was supposed to store value, the building, was never financially designed to store any. You might assume a rule living on a tax spreadsheet should not matter much in the real world. But this is where it gets interesting, because the paper rule makes itself come true. Start with financing. Japanese banks assess a loan on the combined value of land and building. Once a wooden house is past its 22-year life, lenders treat the building as worth nothing, so a buyer often cannot get a normal mortgage on it, however solid it really is. For a foreign buyer without permanent residency, that screening is tighter still, which is a major reason cheap older houses are so often cash-only deals. Then comes resale. If banks will not finance the next buyer, demand thins out, and the price falls to match the land alone. It also helps explain the bulldozers. When the building already counts for nothing, spending money to renovate it rarely lifts the resale price. So owners and developers often find it cheaper to flatten the house and start fresh than to restore it. Renovation becomes a personal lifestyle choice, not a financial investment. And for investors, that fast write-down is actually a weapon. The depreciating building becomes a paper loss that shelters rental income from tax. So the 22-year rule quietly shapes who can buy, how they pay, what the place resells for, whether it gets fixed or flattened, and how the wealthy use it. A number that began as accounting becomes the gravity of the entire market. But here is the nuance that separates a careful buyer from a panicked one. The claim that Japanese houses are worthless in 20 or 30 years is a financial statement, not a structural one. And as a description of the actual building, it is badly oversimplified. That famous 30-year lifespan figure traces back to an old study from the 1990s that leaned on tax ledger data, essentially measuring the accounting life, not the house. More recent research, including work associated with Waseda University, puts the real average lifespan of a Japanese home at around 64 years, and a well-built, well-maintained modern house can last longer than that. The building is not turning to dust on schedule. It is being written off on schedule, and then, very often, torn down because the market simply assumes it should be. For you, the buyer, that gap is the entire opportunity. A structurally sound house the system has already declared worthless can be genuinely, deeply cheap, as long as you go in understanding that you are mainly buying the land, financing it carefully, and judging the building by its condition rather than its birthday. So treat the 22 years as what it is, a financial countdown, not a demolition notice. Read the building's real condition, check whether it meets the post-1981 earthquake standard, and price it knowing the land is the part that holds its value. The 22-year rule is real. The belief that it means the house is finished is not. If this made Japan's empty house market a little clearer, subscribe to Akiya Handbook, the channel that explains how Japan's cheap houses actually work, honestly, and without selling you anything. There is also a free guide waiting in the description, the Akiya Buyer's Starter Guide, How to Buy a Cheap House in Japan Without Getting Burned. 11 chapters on the truth about so-called free houses, the hidden costs, and who should not buy. No hype, and completely free. The link is below. Thanks for watching.